Welcome back to another episode of the Box Seat Babes podcast. Today we're discussing the North American touring production of the Book of Mormon, which is currently stopped in Detroit as the penultimate show of the 2024-2025 Broadway in Detroit season. But before we jump into what you can expect from this musical, please like, follow, and subscribe to us, Box Seat Babes, on all social media platforms at Box Seat Babes. And spoiler warning, we will be talking in depth about the story of the Book of Mormon, so if you haven't seen it yet and want to go into it blind, stop listening, come back after you've seen the show. We'd love to have you. But if you're still here, get ready for a religious experience unlike anything you've ever seen before. And joining me as always is RJ Miller-Zelinko, my co-host, my fellow Box Seat Babe. How you doing today, sir?
You know, I just have to let the people know that I never know what you're going to say during the introduction, and so it's always a first time for me hearing it when we record it. So if you're watching and you see my facial expressions, it's because it's also my first time hearing what Brian has to say, and half the time it cracks me up. So I try to keep it in, but
Was it the religious experience?
it was the religious experience part that it got me. It got me good.
Spoiler alert, anybody who's listening, this is about religion. So
Just in
if you haven't
case
figured that out from the title.
you were wondering.
But thank you so much always for being here. I'm so excited to have you back after you missed Kimberly Akimbo. And what a show to come back to. What a show to return to our Broadway in Detroit family. Like you've missed for so long, like you haven't been here. But
Yeah, I've been gone for so long.
how familiar were you with the Book of Mormon prior to seeing it Tuesday night?
So I have seen it in passing. Again, back to my previous life, my previous work life of being an usher when this show came through. As we know, or as we'll talk about, this show tends to tour for as an extension of a season, typically not as a full part of a season. Although I think when I saw it, I was in Grand Rapids ushering the show, and I think it did run for a full week. But because of people coming in and out, especially with the show, there's a lot of latecomers, a lot of people getting drinks, just a lot of audience moving, and that was my job. So I missed a lot of the actual show because I wasn't like sitting and watching it. But that was a really long way to say I have seen portions of the show before.
So he said in a past life, he actually starred in the show and he doesn't want anyone to know this.
Yeah, absolutely not.
He was Elder Cunningham, the second one, not the first one, because that's obviously Josh Gad. But Broadway was very enthused with his performance in what is being described as not Josh Gad. So
I mean, honestly, he doesn't really dance, does he?
He
It
does
would
not.
literally be the only role that I could play in this show.
So I did see this show before. This is one of Marty's, our friend Marty's, favorite shows. So when I went first on my first trip to New York, the trip that began this journey into Broadway for me, and on a professional level, that is, we saw the Book of Mormon, and I hated it. And I am going to get flack for that on the internet. I did not like Book of Mormon. It wasn't my cup of tea, which is interesting because I was somebody who, at the right age, at 17, 18, watched South Park and thought it was funny, like every other teenage boy from the time period who had access to cable and Saturday evenings to themselves. My sister, actually, my sister Brandy, she liked South Park and had all the seasons of it, which is also really weird because as a book nerd, I did not understand how those two things computed when I was a little bit younger. But yeah, I didn't like Book of Mormon, and I could not figure out why. And I think it clicked in while we were at this performance why I didn't like it. It was the last show of a 10-show stretch, and we had 10 shows in 6 days. And we woke up, we went to the show, we got onto a plane. It was raining. We were exhausted. We didn't know about comfortable seats in New York because we had never been there as adults. And so I think I was just so worn out leading up to the show that I was just like, this show's not for me. It's for somebody. It's not for me. Um, so yeah, that was my way into the Book of Mormon, which is a long way to say yes, I've seen it before. I actually got to sit and enjoy it in the stage where it opened up on Broadway. And now we got to see it again. So that being said, initial thoughts. What did you think of this show? What did you think of this North American touring performance of the Book of Mormon? Getting to sit down and enjoy it the way that the Mormon God intended it to be.
Um,
I'm gonna throw as many jokes in as I can because I feel like this show needs it.
it is. I mean, it is exactly what it is. I don't even know how if I have like thoughts.
Which is fair.
Typically, like as we've spoken about before, comedy usually not my thing, especially like when it is just grotesque comedy. That's not the right word, but crude comedy. Um, However, the thing that is oddly the redeeming quality of this production isn't the production itself, but the audience of the production.
Okay, I do need to know more. What do you mean by that?
It just, we have sat through comedies where the audience is completely silent, or there's like one or two people that audibly laugh, and it makes the comedy part painful. Like, or it's just like a, oh, haha, in your head. Whereas
Yes.
this show gives the audience the autonomy to laugh out loud and express those things in a way that many shows do not.
Yeah.
Um, and so there's a relaxed feeling, I think, that almost, I think, subconsciously is giving people the safety net to laugh out loud or to just kind of chuckle, or you're chuckling at the person next to you who's hysterically laughing. You know what I mean? Like you don't even, with this show, you don't have to be laughing at the show. You could be laughing at the hilarity of the entire experience.
I do want, just speaking about that, and I do want to come back to the audience that we did have probably in part two. But I want to say that you are 100% correct because I think I found myself laughing more by our two guests who were just having the time of their lives. And every time I'd catch them in the corner of their eyes, like the corner of my eye, and they were just roaring with laughter to the point where I felt myself laughing with them because they were enjoying it so much. And so there was this more of a lot of the times with these shows, we do have a very serious audience because theater people tend to be a little more serious. We tend to be a little more reserved with our emotions when it comes to things like this. And again, I'm thinking like we've had a few comedies. Shrek, it was the one that started off the season, and there was a few times where people weren't laughing and you were a little cringy. And Some Like It Hot, where there was laughter, but it was more subdued. This one was very, um, is roarious the right word? Like there was people were having the time of their lives together collectively watching the show on stage, and it speaks to the audience that was drawn to the Book of Mormon.
Well, and I think that I'll just say, like, the last time that I experienced the show was very different. So, and that just goes to tell you, but as we know, this show came this season as a bonus, which, for those of you who don't know what that means, it means people who might have a subscription. It's not part of the season. It's a ticket that you have to intentionally purchase. You have to separately buy it. And so last time I saw this production, it was a part of a season package. And oftentimes when you buy a season package, maybe you don't like every show that's coming through, and or you don't know every show that's coming through, and most people don't bother to read the descriptions um, until the last minute, if at all. And
Yeah.
so as I'm sure we'll get into the details of why, but the collective audience vibe was substantially different. I mean, we basically had a sold out show, I would say, this week.
Yes.
Um, with
Which all
people
shows
who,
are.
yeah, with people who want to be there, they stuck around because they came for this. Whereas with subscribers, they might leave, or in my previous case, they did leave. Um, because as we'll discuss, like well, even as you said, like this is by the writers of South Park. Nobody's kidding anybody in regards to the humor that's happening here. There's no mincing words. So people
Yeah.
have thoughts and feelings and opinions, and if it's not your cup of tea, I can understand. I can understand.
See, speaking of the creators, yeah, we have Trey Parker and we have Matt Stone, who are known for. I mean, they just announced they just released a trailer for the next season on South Park. It's still ongoing. It's
I don't
still a
even know
very,
that.
yeah, it was a big deal. People were really excited about it. Um, they're still making movies and video games. Like these, this is a comedy that's actually very topical. They used to make the show like about things that happened the week before, and they used to like push it out really quickly. That's why there wasn't a lot of episodes. Thank you to my sister for that knowledge. It came in handy one day. Um, but also they're joined with Robert Lopez, who, if anybody in the Broadway world recognizes that name, it's for Avenue Q, which is also rather raunchy in the comedy that's presented. And while Robert Lopez did um, write songs for Frozen 1 and Frozen 2 and Coco, which is just hilarious to me how we pivoted, but Avenue Q was also not for children. It was for adults, and it was like Sesame Street for adults, and there was a lot of unbelievable like comedy to that. And so they do kind of go hand in hand with how they approach this. Um, but to jump into the story, people might be thrown off by the name the Book of Mormon. I remember being, when this first came out in 2011, I was freshly graduated, a freshman in college, and this show came out, and I said, why would I ever want to see a show called the Book of Mormon? I didn't grow up in a very religious family. I'm not Mormon. It did not compute that this was like a satirical show about the power of organized religion and how that's not always so great. I mean, I guess that's kind of the takeaway of it. But did you have like a different takeaway from the story?
It is the truest version of satire that I know in regards to a show that I can think of at least recently. Um, I did on the flip side, I did grow up in a religious household, um, as we've probably discussed before, Catholic home, but my mom is very much into us learning about all things and everything. And so, actually, a few years ago, we took a vacation to Utah and we went to Salt Lake City and we went to their, I want to say campus, but that's not what it's, their city center.
Sure.
Um, and we went to like, they have like a museum or like a learning center. They probably don't call it a museum. We went to the church. We spoke with them. Um, and uh, coming from a religious school where I also had to learn about the different religions, I kind of knew how it worked or like what the purpose in regards to their theology. And so, probably, I mean, I was probably a teenager, so maybe like 16, 17-year-old me is completely avoiding running into any of them because I know if we get into a discussion, it's going to be a long one. And I was a 16-year-old on vacation that just wanted to go back to the pool, So,
For sure.
but funny story, my mom did get kind of, I mean, she has so many questions, and they love questions because that means that you're learning more about, of
For
course,
sure.
their religion and probably more likely to then convert, right? And so, Sister Peggy That's her name. That's what they call you, right? Um, she got a book. She got the Book of Mormon given to her before we left. And then like 2 weeks after we got home, someone showed up at her door. And my mom let them in and they talked more. Obviously, my mom did not convert. She's still a very devout Catholic, but it cracks me up a little bit because I would never. But she just genuinely wanted to know. I think the overlap in religion and the overlap of what the Book of Mormon means versus Christianity is intriguing to her. But that's a total side story. You're so welcome, world.
Eat that up. It's gonna be one of our best episodes ever. Um, but it does lead us into the kind of the premise of this show, where it starts with our young, not quite missionaries yet, ringing the doorbell to try to convert people and try to teach them about the Book of Mormon, which is I'm gonna mess this up. The third gospel, is that the correct terminology?
I mean, truthfully, I don't even. Yeah, ultimately, it's supposed to be there's the Old Testament, the New Testament, and then the Book of
The Book of
Mormon.
Mormon. And so while the religion is an important aspect of the show, it's really not about the religion. It is about Elder Price, who has lived his life by the words of the Book of Mormon. By he's embodied every aspect of that because he thinks that he's going to be rewarded by God. And for him, rewarded by God means going to Orlando, Florida to be a missionary, because that is the happiest place on earth. And anybody who is below the age of 18 has visited Disney World is probably agreeing with that. Um, and so he wants to go to Orlando so bad, but instead he's sent to Uganda with Elder Cunningham, who is the epitome of just the most annoying kid that you've ever met, who just wants a friend and is going to lie his way through it to have that friend. And they're kind of shuffled off into this world that is so much unlike their own. Um, and it is also reflective of an actual missionary journey without the comedy aspect. At least I hope some of that comedy aspect isn't there. Um, what are your thoughts on this journey for Elder Price and Elder Cunningham?
Yeah, I mean, it really does just take what the expectations are from the real life Mormonism, if that's even a term, and stretch it to be so extreme to a degree, because also like missionaries are very real, and going to third world countries is very much a thing. Um, but yeah, you have the drama of kind of the self-servingness, except that is still very harshly tied into, if I do this many good deeds, if I help convert this many people, um, I get my own planet, uh, which is, even talked about in a couple of the songs too. So there's like, it is just so intimately tied to the the truths that Mormons believe, but to someone I think who doesn't believe, it is hysterical, because it seems like it's the most extreme that, well, like out of context, like without any background, you'd be like, what do you mean you get your own planet? Like, what do you mean you have to do a bunch of good works basically for the rest of forever? And that determines what your, you know, what we would call the afterlife um, looks like. But the dynamic between the two, again, I honestly, Elder Cunningham reminds me of like SpongeBob. Like I
Okay.
literally envision, and maybe it's because we just saw SpongeBob, but I'm thinking Elder Price is Squidward,
Okay.
and Elder Cunningham is probably actually a mix of SpongeBob and Patrick. That level of like kind of dumb and annoying. Like you have the stupidity of Patrick and the annoyance of SpongeBob,
Yes.
and just being like, "We're best friends. I just met you 3 seconds ago. We're best friends, and I would do anything for you, even though that it's not at all reciprocated."
And what I think is interesting about their journeys is that, so, they go to Uganda and they're going to convert the Ugandans to Mormonism. And, well, first off, the Ugandans are having nothing to do with it. There's missionaries that have been there forever. They're not buying it because it's not going to actively change their life, which is interesting because I think that's what a lot of people who come to religion, and they're just like, how is this going to actively change my life? How is believing in something bigger going to make me pay my bills? How is it going to make me be able to afford to go to the doctors, And so you're having this real life dynamic that people experience on a daily basis. And then you're watching people, two missionaries have the completely like reversed journeys, You have Elder Cunningham who's going from not really believing because he doesn't know the stories. He makes up stories to get people to believe in them, but he finds out the power of belief is important because as long as you're believing in something, there's the community of that aspect. And then you have Elder Price, who is having this conflict, this crisis of conscience, and just not knowing what to do because God didn't give him what he was promised, and that it's not working out the way it's supposed to. And he's used to being the best person all the time, and he's not the best at this because he himself is kind of doubting this power as well. And so it's very interesting. There's like, when you start to break down the psychology of it, there's so much going on in the Book of Mormon that I seem to have missed the first time. And that makes this a little more of a dynamic show that I could appreciate a little bit more.
Yeah, and I think it brings levels of religion that everyone can kind of like. It doesn't matter what your beliefs are or what faith, if you follow a faith, what it is. Because yeah, Elder Price, his not only self-doubt, but then doubt, very passive comments throughout the show that kind of are very sweetly integrated on, I mean, things like, "Oh, you mean this thing that doesn't make any sense, but we're believing in it anyway?" Um, I think a lot of people have felt that way at one time or another in their faith journey or lack thereof. And so there are moments of, even though it's comedy, there are moments of clarity, I would say.
For sure. Absolutely. And I think that ultimately, what I liked about the show is that it did give you the room for these characters to kind of question it, but they did all come back to the fact of like there is power in this, and there is power in believing in something. Um, which I hear a lot from people who come to me, and they say I don't, because in the intake we always ask like any religious affiliations, and a lot of people will say I believe in something, but I don't know what I believe in. And so the Book of Mormon, the show, kind of tells us that it doesn't matter what you believe in, but believing in something, be it believing in other humans, believing in science, believing in a higher power, there is power in that. Like you said, it kind of applies to everybody across the wide range, like the board, and so that's very exciting to kind of be able to take that away from the show a little bit. Was there anybody who stood out to you from this touring production? Any characters, any actors? I know we had quite a few um, understudies on stage, which was also very exciting to see.
Well, I always forget that shows like this one, because the Elder Price is such a he's kind of like the male version of like Elphaba and Wicked. Like it's a vocal powerhouse that just requires so much of a person that they have two of them all the time,
Okay.
and that they just go back and forth. So that because I wasn't sure looking at the board at first. I was like, oh yeah, that's a lot of names. But then when you read the program, it's like, oh, he's not an understudy. It's just one or the other. Like,
Oh, okay.
but then that kind of domino effect of, okay, well, if this person's playing this day, then that means that these three other people are covering this other thing that he does when he's not that. And the web of, you know,
Always
uh
knowing what you're doing.
yeah, the domino effect of that. But I have to shout out our Elder Cunningham,
Diego Enrico.
Diego. Yeah, he just killed it. I mean, they all really did, but his comedic timing was so good, and it was so stark. Like things went from just this very like elementary level um to as soon as he really had that first I think it was Man Up. The second that song hit, it was like he was a different person. Um, so yeah, it was just
I
a
agree.
incredible performance.
I think that it was one of my favorites. And I remember when I saw it in New York, the person we had playing Elder Cunningham, I actually did not like. And it actually, to me, it ruined the show a little bit because it was such a trying to be like a one for one of Josh Gad that it just felt like it felt annoying. Like it felt like you're trying to be an over the top Josh Gad. And Diego wasn't trying to be anybody else but other than Diego's version of Elder Cunningham. And you could really feel that in the way he was performing this character, where he was annoying without like his voice wasn't like the squeaky voice that you associate with this role. It was very much like it was him being Diego. And I loved it. Like he made the show for me this time around. Whereas the last time I saw it, that role really ruined it for me.
Yeah, it that role specifically too, I think gives balance to, or maybe kind of is a neutrality amongst the comedy because he the innocence of him just kind of makes the craziness of everything else better.
Yes.
Um, and so, yeah, I don't know. It just felt, and it didn't, again, kind of to what you're saying, like it didn't feel like anyone else, he wasn't trying to emulate a performance by anyone else. It felt very in line with his stage presence for the entire show.
And his chemistry with Kiki Nesbitt, who played Nabulongi, was just so like there was undeniable chemistry between the two of them that um I loved it. I mean, I loved her performance too. I felt like there was a little more hope in the role than I've ever seen before. Obviously she's somebody that just wants to escape the the, the issues, and I can't believe I'm about to say this on camera. She does not want to get her clit cut off. Like she just very much wants freedom, and she sees freedom and she takes it, or she tries to take it, not understanding that like kind of they said, being Mormon is a community, it's not a place. And so like seeing the two of them, Diego and Kiki, feed off each other was probably one of the best parts of the show for me. They had an energy that was just you couldn't look away as they were giving it their all on stage. Really, truly, them along with our Elder Price, who was also just phenomenal. He was fantastic. I'm looking for his name real quick. Vance. Vance was also fantastic in the role and made me believe it. I mean, the three of them together really made this show for me.
Yeah, and I mean, of course, they're carrying so much of the vocal and comedic uh, portions of the show. I do have to shout out our general though, because he is a Michigan He's from or went to school here in Michigan. I just saw that today, actually, trying to
Wayne
remember where.
Wayne
Wayne
State.
State? Yeah. And he was very good too. I mean, I was cracking up at the last scene.
Where he's ringing the bell.
Yeah, yeah. So, but yeah,
Yeah,
just a stellar. I mean, I think the show travels incredibly well. The talent was it was well cast. Like there wasn't any. It didn't seem like there were any soft spots in the production.
agreed. And so with that, we have reached the conclusion of part 1 of our Book of Mormon discussion. But stay tuned for part 2, where we will be talking about the music and technical aspects of the show, as well as giving our final verdict. Thank you again for joining us here in our holy box seats. Till next curtain call.